Well, I know one thing that I struggle with, and I think a lot of us as anglers do, is underestimating how shallow bass will go throughout much of the year, even in really adverse conditions. I'm talking super clear water, water that we think is too hot, or even at times when lakes are pressured. Well, these are the factors, and it can help us as anglers determine whether to go shallow or deep all throughout the year. Number one, and this was probably the most important, is the portion of the lake that I was fishing a little bit offshore. That deeper water had zero features to it. It was structureless. There was nothing there. There was not any real substantial cover down there. It was just a very blah portion of the lake, but I kept trying to force myself to fish it. So that really stood out when I'm finally like, you know what, I'm not getting hung up down here. I'm not feeling anything down here. Didn't even see anything on my graph as far as bottom contours, breaks, or anything like that. That really told me, hey, this isn't gonna happen offshore. The next thing, when I started to then focus up on the shallows, is I found a few areas where that first break, that area where it drops off to deeper water, was nice right up there close to very shallow water. And even though I was not getting bites in deeper water, if those bass are shallow and they get put on alert, they get scared for some reason, the first thing that they're going to do is try to get a little bit deeper for protection. So finding areas that dropped off quickly was very, very critical to the success. Next, I started to see in this particular portion of the lake a lot of panfish really shallow. Are you seeing bluegills shallow? Are you seeing minnows dart around? Are you seeing shad in the ultra shallows? And I mean, these bluegills were in way, way, way less than a foot of water. Well, predators like to be around food, right? We know that. I wasn't finding any bait offshore in the deeper stuff at all. They were all up here in less than a foot of water, or kind of investigating that drop off just off of the shallows. And in this particular portion, the predominant cover providing that shade, providing that protection from above, was all of this overhanging brush. And I mean, it really reached out there a long ways over these shallows. So you could have 6 or 8 foot of water that was, you know, less than a foot deep or less than 2 feet deep, all underneath of this brush. And this particular nice bass right here was swimming in this open water underneath this overhanging brush. And if we take a look at it from out of the water, this is where that bass was positioned. This is how far back under here that bass was sitting. And of course, there's other things that could provide this shallow water comfort level. Could be docks, right? Could be the brush like we've got here, but it could also be where the wind is stirring up the shallows and making the water a little bit cloudy, or we had some rain, something where they feel a little bit more protected. That is often why wind-blown banks are so good. Okay, so then it hit me, right? All right, these fish got to be shallow. Well, knowing they're shallow and catching them are completely two different things. Shallow bass are easy to put on alert. We all know that. So here's how I approached it. I tried to use distance as my friend. I tried to be as far away as I could from the shallow water, but still cast accurately. That's a nice fish. That's a nice one. That's a nice one. Boy, fat too. I also let the wind push me a little bit so I could stay off the trolling motor. Most of the time I'm always going into the wind for better boat control, but in this particular situation, targeting fish that were in that water less than a foot deep, I turned off my graphs. I did all of this stuff to try to be as stealthy as possible. And then as far as bait selection, I found what worked well for me here was a 4-inch wacky rig, and I used the smallest, lightest one I had with me. So in that water that was shallow, it would drop through the water column over the longest amount of time. And it worked out very well. I started to pick up just a ton of bites and catch fish. And here's the part that was really fun, is even if I couldn't skip it way up under that brush, because you can see how gnarly and thick it was, then of course I tried to drop it as close to the edge as I could. And here's the part that was really fun. I let the bluegills help me, those panfish. As that wacky rig would just drop through the water column, they would dart out from their protection. Their curiosity pulled them in, and they'd kind of take a look at it. I was like, you know what? If the panfish are doing that, if I can feel them nibbling on this stuff, that's probably going to put the predators or the bass in the area like, hey, what's going on over here? What are they interested in? And it worked out really well. And hey, if you'd like to watch a video that goes over what I think is one of the best methods for ultra realistic bait movement for those bottom bouncing baits, go ahead and check this one out right here. And make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.